Here elsewhere with some clearer skies, temperatures, certainly in rural spots, could dip down to single figures. So for many, it is a bright start to Thursday. There'll be some sunshine around. Still quite gusty across the far north of Scotland with a few showers. But for much of Scotland, looking drier tomorrow with some decent spells of sunshine. Will cloud over across the southwest as the cloud and rain spills into northwest England and parts of the south of Northern Ireland. A very different day for Wales and southwest England tomorrow. A lot of cloud, rain and drizzle on and off for much of the day, particularly over hills and around the coast. Whereas the Midlands and eastern England, after a dry, fine start, will just steadily cloud over. Rain trickling into parts of the Midlands, spreading across more northern parts of England. Some heavier bursts of rain possible later in the day. Not much rain for East Anglia in the southeast, just turning cloudy here, and the far northeast of Scotland also mostly dry. Temperatures 19, 20, maybe a little higher in the southeast. It is going to feel really quite warm and humid, however. The rain and drizzle will be still across the south early on Friday, but it should scoot away. Showers in the northwest, but for many, Friday's set fair, a much brighter day for Wales and southwest England for sure, with some good spells of sunshine and a fresher feel. Showery rain on Saturday, and it is likely to hot up again as we go through the weekend.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We could be calling you with the news that you've won our latest Great British giveaway. An incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash. David from Kent was our last big winner. Listen to what he had to say about getting that winning call.
Hi, I'm David from Kent and I won £15,000 and it couldn't have come at a better time. I was gobsmacked. What have you got to lose for what it costs? In fact, I've done it again this week, so I'd recommend it to anybody.
For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it?
Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, I'm Christopher Hope, GB News' political editor, standing in for Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg on State of the Nation tonight. It's 9 days since those dreadful stabbings in Southport and still protests continue across the country. Tonight, I'll be interviewing a senior government minister and a close ally of Sir Keir Starmer about the government's response. I'll also be speaking to Leicestershire's Police and Crime Commissioner, Rupert Matthews, about the disorder in our towns and cities, with Leicester being one of the key places affected. And in light of the criticism by the PM, by the owner of X, or Twitter, Elon Musk, I'll be joined by the man at the centre of the row whose online posts were shared by the billionaire. State of the Nation starts right now. I'll also be joined by my panel, the historian and broadcaster Tessa Dunlop, and the assistant editor of Conservative Home's website, William Atkinson. In spite of Jacob's absence, the email remains the same. Send me your views to mailmog@gbnews.com. That's all to come after the latest headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Chris, thank you. Good evening from the GB newsroom. It's just gone 8 o'clock. Your headlines. Counter-protesters have taken to the streets in the UK as police brace themselves for at least 100 protests and 30 counter-demonstrations. Hundreds of counter-protesters have gathered in Hackney and Walthamstow in London already, whilst they have also been reported in Bristol and Birmingham. A list of immigration law firms have been shared in an online chat group as part of possible targets, which the Director of Public Prosecutions had warned could be considered a terrorism offence. It comes as one case of alleged terrorism is already actively under consideration. Police are urging people to ignore the list of locations, telling rioters officers will be waiting. It comes as at least 12 individuals have been convicted for their part in the ongoing disorder. Speaking a short time ago, Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner said there's no excuse for thuggery.
I know that the public will be feeling anxious about the reports of potential more unrest tonight, but the police will be there to respond to any violence and criminality that we see on our streets. There's no place for that on our UK streets, and the police will do their job like they have done exceptionally well under very difficult circumstances like I've seen here and witnessed today what they faced, missiles being thrown at them and attacks, but the police will be there to keep the public safe, and there's no excuse for thuggery and criminality on the streets.
It comes as a Metropolitan Police Commissioners dismissed accusations of two-tier policing, calling it complete nonsense. The criticism came from figures including Nigel Farage and Elon Musk, who argued that last week's disorder was handled more severely than it would have been if ethnic minorities were involved. Meanwhile, the coroner says it's impossible to articulate the lifelong effects of the stabbing attack in Southport over a week ago. Inquests into the deaths of 6-year-old BB King, Alice da Silva Aguiar, who was 9, and 7-year-old Elsie Stankum have been opened and adjourned. 17-year-old Axel Rudabakanu will stand trial next year after being charged with 3 counts of murder and 10 of attempted murder. And it's understood the King has asked for daily updates on protests planned around the UK. Following the Southport stabbings, King Charles is said to be engaging privately in the issues of the unrest and what it's generated. The King has a record of involvement in issues around community cohesion and interfaith dialogue. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Wensler, more in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back to State of the Nation with me, Christopher Hope. Now, the country has braced itself for what police fear will be more than 100 planned protests and as many 30 counter-protests across the country tonight. So far, a dozen rioters have already been jailed after sentencing was fast-tracked, with one given a 3-year prison term following disorder in Liverpool. Shops and businesses around the UK have been boarded up, and all eyes are on the government's and police's response. A few moments ago, I spoke to the Cabinet Office Minister, Sir Nick Thomas Symonds. Nick Thomas-Simmons, when will the rioting stop?
Well, there should be a very strong message today going out to people that anybody thinking of engaging in this violent disorder, this thuggery, shouldn't do it, because we've seen 3 prison sentences handed down today. Yeah. Men who 8 days ago were engaged in violent disorder, in one case an attack on an emergency service worker, who've been sentenced to 20 months, 2.5 years and 3 years. And the message today, anyone thinking of doing this, you will feel the full force of the law, and as we've seen, you will feel it swiftly as well.
Who's to blame? Is it the far right, as the government keeps saying?
The people to blame, and there should be no moral ambiguity about this, are the people who are engaging in this disorder themselves. The Prime Minister has said, if you turn up to something carrying weapons, you are not going there for legitimate protest. You're going there for the purpose of perpetrating violence. And I was particularly chilled by police officers who were first responders at those appalling killings, attacks we saw in Southport Monday, the start of last week, who were themselves, having been the first responders, then subject to attack. It's appalling.
We're hearing from viewers and listeners of GB News that the government keeps saying it's the far right behind this, but there's a wider concern. Do you recognise that about immigration? It isn't always the far right saying things?
Look, let's just separate these things out, because prior to the general election, in 6-week campaign, I was up and down the country. Indeed, for months before that, out campaigning, I was speaking to people up and down the country who had concerns about a variety of issues, including immigration. The people I was speaking to on the doorstep with concerns, legitimate concerns about the level of immigration, they weren't people who were going to go out and commit violence. They were people having a perfectly legitimate discussion. I think we should see these things as separate.
People say there's a 2-tier policing system. Now it's a 2-tier justice system with a swift justice and jail terms for violent thugs. What do you say to those critics?
Well, firstly, I was the Shadow Home Secretary for a while. Christine may even have interviewed me when I was. And I used to go out in those days quite frequently with frontline police officers, and I saw the dangers they put themselves in. They put themselves in harm's way to keep the public safe. And with public order, our police officers have to make some very difficult judgments in the most difficult of circumstances. I don't accept they do that in a 2-tier way. I think they do a very difficult job to keep the public safe.
And will there be a point at which it's time for the government to look more closely at the reasons behind this rioting? It is appalling, as you say, for police who trying to deal with the murders, the killings in Southport, and then to have to be facing these troubles across the country. But there's a point at which the government may want to understand and learn about the frustrations of people.
Well, I think we have seen communication on social media in a way we've not seen in previous disorder, and clearly in the medium term the government is going to be looking at our Online Safety Act, how we properly regulate social media. But as of today, let's be absolutely clear. I've said people who commit violent disorder, we've seen the prison sentences they face quickly. It is also the case, if you're an armchair thug, if you like, not just a thug on the streets, if you're sending threats of violence or organising violence online, then you will feel the full force of the law as well. And that should be absolutely clear.
And what's your view on the Elon Musk situation? He's been questioning the approach by the government.
Well, look, in terms of, as I say, social media platforms,
he's a user and an owner.
The Secretary of State, relevant Secretary of State, Peter Kyle, has had in representatives from X, from Meta, and indeed from Google and others to set out their responsibility for keeping the users of their platforms safe. But how we regulate these platforms nationally, internationally, of course the government will look at that and keep it under review. But we should be clear, people who put material on those platforms that breaks the law, the responsibility is theirs.
But you do accept, don't you, that the violence is by all different groups of the community? Black people, white people, Asian people and the like. It's not just a certain...
But the law applies equally to everybody. I don't accept the idea of 2-tier policing. I don't accept the idea of 2-tier sentencing. You break the law, you face the consequences. That's the rule of law we have in this country. And what the government is saying today is anyone thinking of going out and committing violent offences, you will feel the full force of that law.
Just very finally, Robert Jenrick, who's the favourite to replace Rishi Sunak as the Tory leader, he says that protesters who shout Allah Akbar in protest should be arrested. Should they?
Look, I'm not inserting myself into the Tory leadership contest. Whatever debate they want to have is a matter for them. The government's priority is about keeping the public safe, about sending out a strong message about what the consequences are for breaking the law, but also the 5,000 or so specialist police officers that the Prime Minister has set up will be available to be deployed as needed. That's our priority.
And just finally about tonight, are you ready for what may happen across the country tonight? Is the government ready for the problems, the concerns we're seeing from police?
The Prime Minister has chaired 2 meetings of COBRA, has made available, as I've said, these thousands of specialist officers ready to be deployed. They are available, but we are also, with the sentences handing out today, sending a message to anyone, people who may hear this programme or indeed on any other media. The government's position is clear. If you are even contemplating engaging in that violent thuggery, think again, because you'll feel the full force of the law.
Nick Thomas-Symonds, thank you for joining us today on GB News. Thank you. Nick Thomas-Symonds there. Now, more on that in a moment. But first, Charlie Peters, our national reporter, is in Aldershot, where a protest has begun. Charlie, what's happening with you?
Hi, Chopper. Well, a demonstration has started here in Aldershot. It was a quiet but quite a febrile atmosphere earlier today, this afternoon in the town. All of the shops boarded up along the main high road. We saw some boarding going on when we arrived. There was a peaceful anti-immigration demonstration nearby in Farnborough outside the council buildings. People there complaining about the small boats crisis, making a stance against what they said was uncontrolled immigration, which was moving into some of the properties in this area here, taking away local authority properties and moving them towards asylum seekers who've come over on small boats. Now, that attracted a lot of positive attention from locals. People were beeping their horns as they drove past. But now, 10 minutes ago, this demonstration in response has started in the centre of town. And as you can see, there's quite a significant so-called counter-protest, if you like, a sort of anti-racist, perhaps a pro-migration demonstration across the road here, separated by police as an anti-immigration demonstration on the other side. It seems to be that what I'm seeing on my right, the demonstration on this side of the road, is a more of an organic gathering of people who just turned up in reaction to this major demonstration across the road. Because the only planned protest that took place here was the one down the road in Farnborough. I hope we can show you some photos on our screens there, because there are people gathering on the roadside, holding up signs against mass migration, against the small boat crisis. We do have some clips to show you of the people who were there, because they were asked what they thought about Keir Starmer describing some of the protesters as far right. Okay, so they were saying they were far right at that location. A lot of people were very angry about those claims, very angry about the Prime Minister using that language. But they also condemned the violence. They condemned the disorder that we've seen over the last week. But there was meant to be a larger demonstration in the town here, according to some of the rumours that were circulating online. That never materialised. But I think quite similar to what you've seen across the country, you've seen these sorts of demonstrations appear, even though people that they're meant to be demonstrating against haven't turned up. And as you can see, there's some signs saying refugees welcome, stop the far right, T-shirts saying refugees welcome. Our enemies travel by private jet, not small boats. Well, a lot of people in Aldershot this evening saying they're extremely frustrated by the small boat situation. I'm not sure they describe them as their enemies, but they do feel as though that situation is putting enormous pressure on the country. I've seen a woman over there wearing a T-shirt that says, "We'll trade racists for refugees." Again, people here I spoke to earlier this evening in Aldershot were angry about the connotations that they might be racist for just opposing mass immigration. There was a lot of anger against that violence, a lot of anger against that disorder that we've seen across the country over the last week. People didn't want to see Aldershot smashed up in the way that we have seen in Cleveland in the northeast, in Middlesbrough, and indeed in several other towns across the country. But at the same time, they felt as though some of the political rhetoric about people concerned about immigration was causing some concerns. I think I can now show you some of those clips of what people were saying in Aldershot earlier this evening when they were asked what they felt about some of the protests being described as far right.
We're at the protest because we don't think that people should be able to enter the country illegally and then just stay and be put into apartments. It's not about normal immigration, it's about illegal immigration.
I'm definitely not far right. Mind you, I've been called far right by this current leader of our government, and I'm absolutely disgusted by it. I think it's terrible, really do.
It's not just about two-tier karma, whatever you want to call it these days. I'm not interested in that. I'm talking about the Tories and Labour at the moment. All of them, lock, stock and barrel, have failed to listen to the general public. Now, the British people, you know, they're pretty calm and collective, but when they bite back, they bite back.
Well, thank you, Charlie. We'll be getting into much more of that after the break, including your reaction to Nick Thomas Simmons' interview, as well as the thoughts of the Leicester Police and Crime Commissioner. Back soon.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
The sunny spell that many have experienced this week makes this the perfect time to seek inspiration for fresh, beautiful food to fit the weather. Hannah Harley-Young from Crazy Sexy Food joins me once again for the latest in our Taste of Britain series. And to go alongside the return of the glorious sunshine, she recommends tequila.
To be honest with you, it's more about my total love of tequila. It is my favourite drink. I have my favourite cocktail ready to be shaped for you in a second, which is obviously the margarita. But I think also I just love this sort of general story of tequila. Tequila, a bit like with champagne, can only be produced in the region of Tequila in Mexico. But I've actually brought for you, interestingly, a brand that is London-based. This was set up by Tom and Jack. They were drinking, I think, in sort of 2018, 2019, somewhere in South London, and realised that tequila could actually be quite enjoyable.
Do you know what it's made of?
It is. It's made from the blue agave plant. Now, 300 million of these plants are harvested every year. It takes between 8 to 12 years to harvest. Their tequila is made to be drank with tonic, which is not your usual accompaniment with tequila. Usually it's lime, it's a margarita. With a Blanco tequila, the idea is that the process is that once it's distilled, that is the end, it's bottled and it's sold. This is the Reposado. I haven't actually opened that, but if you do want to have a smell, you can open it. But the idea behind this is that it's been rested, so it's rested in oak barrels. I actually love people's behaviour behind tequila now. I think back in the day it had a little slightly bad rep that you'd drink cheap shots and maybe make some bad mistakes on a night out, whereas now we're actually starting to appreciate it and respect it.
GB News, the People's Channel. Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m, followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain, followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled. Lovely.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to State of the Nation. We've just spoken to Labour Cabinet Office Minister Nick Thomas Simmons, and you've been getting in touch with your views. Muriel says we are far too soft on these rioters. Water cannons should be used. I think they were sold off by Theresa May, I think, from memory. Philip says it doesn't seem like there's been many riots as expected, exclamation mark. Well, that's good news, Philip. And Annabelle says, has JRM, Jacob Rees-Mogg, returned to Somerset early to prepare for the Clutton Flower Show? I will ask him when I see him, Annabelle. Now, joining me to react on what Nick Thomas Simmons had to say about the riots is Leicestershire Police and Crime Commissioner Rupert Matthews. Rupert, welcome to the show. Did you hear what Nick Thomas Simmons had to say?
Yeah, I caught the second half. I didn't come in time for the first bit, but yeah, broadly.
I mean, he's saying that the big criticism from viewers of GB News and listeners is that they're talking about the far right when there are wider concerns about immigration. Is that something you see where you are?
Yeah, I think so. And also, of course, it's not just the far right that have been causing unrest recently. I mean, previously we had trouble after the incident at the airport. We had trouble in Leeds and so on. So what worries me is that there seems to be a readiness amongst people to go out on the streets, cause trouble, smash up property and attack the police. And that's absolutely unacceptable, whatever the reason for doing it. And I think the priority now has got to be to stop the civic unrest, to stop the public disorder taking place. Once that's taken care of, then perhaps we can start looking at the grievances that people might have. There's no excuse at all for this sort of violence.
No, no, exactly, Rupert. There were 5 arrests in Leicester over the weekend. What's the current situation as we speak? We've heard from Charlie Peters in Aldershot. How's Leicester? OK, well, there were 5 arrests over the weekend, but there was a lot of disinformation on the internet as well. I saw one report saying there were 20,000 people out on the streets. It didn't even reach 200. So there was a bit of problems, but we've dealt with it. Leicestershire police are very well equipped. They're very well led. We've got excellent training for our public disorder officers. And I took part in one of them as a fake rioter myself at one point. So no, I've read the report. I've seen the action plan for what the Leicestershire police have got in hand. I'm absolutely confident we can deal with anything that we're foreseeing happening. And as things stand tonight, is it calm in Leicester?
Yeah, I've not had any reports that it's not. So as far as I'm concerned, yes, obviously I'm here at home talking to you rather than out on the street. But yes, I've not heard anything.
Yeah. You're a Conservative Police and Crime Commissioner. You see all the criticism of two-tier care, two-tier policing and two-tier justice. Is that fair?
Well, there's no two-tier policing in Leicestershire and Rutland, so I can say that straight away. Yeah, I think it has been unfortunate that some of the members of the Labour Party, including ministers, have made some comments which perhaps would indicate that they might take a more lenient attitude depending on what the cause is that people are protesting about. But certainly, as far as I'm concerned, violence and disorder is absolutely unacceptable. It doesn't matter who's doing it. It doesn't matter what their cause is. That has got to be cracked down on straight away. And I know Leicestershire Police are determined to do it.
Well, what the critics say is that there's different policing for white groups and groups of Asian youth. Is that what you're seeing in Leicester? And if so, are you calling out your police about it? Not happening.
No, absolutely not. I've spoken to the Chief Constable about it. I've spoken to the senior officers who are in charge of dealing with any disorder on the ground in the city. Absolutely not. I've been very clear, and the Chief Constable has been very clear. Leicestershire Police are strictly neutral. It is not their job to judge the motives of people who are causing trouble. If you break the law, you're going to get arrested. End of story.
Absolutely. What do you think is driving the trouble across the country? Why is the rioting in Leicester? Why is the rioting in other parts of the country? We know it's triggered by the dreadful killing of those 3 children in Southport, but is there a deeper issue in the country?
Well, first of all, there wasn't any rioting in Leicester. There were 2 groups of protesters and a couple of arrests. But you're absolutely right. There are wider issues going on here. You've seen it yourself in the report you just had from Aldershot. A lot of people are really upset about what's happening. But like I say, the first thing to do is get on top of the rioting. Whatever your cause, the scenes that you're showing on the TV at the moment are absolutely unacceptable. We live in a democracy. The place for dealing with these things is through the ballot box. If you want to go out on the streets and protest, please do so peacefully. I've been on quite a few protests myself over the years.
Well, why? But Rupert, if I may briefly ask you why are they happening? Just why?
Well, as far as the peaceful protests are concerned, I think that's quite clear. A lot of people are very unhappy with the level of migration, both legal and illegal. And they are feeling that perhaps the government hasn't been listening. And sadly, I think that's the case for a good number of years. Now, there may be reasons for that to do with the European Convention of Human Rights and some of the actions that are taken by the courts. That whatever the reasons, the upshot is a large number of people are not seeing the restrictions on immigration that they want to see. And that is leading to some protests. But like I say, peaceful protests are fine. I've taken part in them myself. Violent protests, doesn't matter what your cause is, you can't have it.
OK, Rupert Williams there, the Leicester Policing and Crime Commissioner. Thank you for joining us tonight on State of the Nation. I'm joined now in the studio here in Westminster by my panel, historian and broadcaster Tessa Dunlop. Great to see you here, Tessa. And, of course, the assistant editor of Conservative Home, William Atkinson. William, to you first, what do you think is the cause of these riots?
Well, I think in a universal sense, there will always be angry young men who, when given the opportunity, or some at least sort of tacit cause, will use that as an opportunity to cause crime and disorder, because it's not only quite fun for them, but because it provides them the opportunity to get rid of all of that energy that angry young men have.
Though, is it?
I think part of it is. You know, I think there is always, for every sort of riot or sort of instance of looting or public disorder, there's always people who will bandwagon on it. And I think, quite frankly...
He's very, very correct. There was one man who was charged today, Derek, a bit older, and he said, I don't know why I was doing it. He clearly had got whipped up in the moment.
And I think, you know, as a historian yourself, you know, this has always been the case going back to the sort of mob violence that was quite sort of ritual almost in the 18th century in this country. But I think, quite frankly, we have to separate two things. There is an attempt, I think, at the moment, especially amongst some on the right, to try and rationalise the disorder that's going on and almost to justify it, which I think is appalling, because... whatever the colour of their skin, whatever their sort of creed, whatever their faith, whatever justification they're currently giving for rationing, or lack of thereof, rioting, I should say, these are angry young men, they are bigots, and they are causing crime and disorder, and they're threatening innocent people, and they must be condemned, and they must be clamped down upon as harshly as possible. And that's what the government's doing? Yes, and that's what the government should be doing, and the Tory party and every political party should be supporting them in doing that. If we want to have a broader conversation about underlying trends or various changes in policy or various sort of large changes in Britain over the last sort of 60, 70 years, whether that's migration or that's the approach we take to policing or community cohesion, all the rest, that's for a separate time. The focus now should not be trying to justify these bigots as they riot. It should be actually trying to clamp down on it and allowing the people of Britain to go around the streets safely at night. Tessa.
I agree. I concur with William, and I thought some of your questioning... Yes, I'm very civilised. I would never riot. Heaven forfend. I thought some of your questioning around two-tier policing, which we've seen you subject both your guests to, almost slightly mendacious. I mean, were you asking those questions in 2011 when 3,000 young, angry men were arrested and 2,000 were charged? I don't remember too many white tears spilling onto pillows at night over whether we had two-tier policing then. So I find that kind of questioning very unhelpful.
It's only reflecting what's being said by critics, by Elon Musk and by...
Now, I suggest, therefore, you're peddling misinformation, Chris, and heaven forfend, we wouldn't expect the mighty chopper to ever do that. I want to then now, if I may, move on to that broader mood music about why we're having these riots. And to me, it's an absolute no-brainer. We have had the promise for well over a decade of levelling up. That's what we were told. Poor, grim bits of England will be levelled up to the bright, shiny metropolis status. It didn't happen. They spanked all the money.
COVID happened.
All sorts of reasons.
Ukraine was invaded.
And the economy was crashed for a number of reasons, some of which were political and unnecessary. One begins with B and the other one begins with L. I'll leave you pondering on those two. But at the same time as that, to distract from the failed government policies, we had the constant stop the boats, national crisis, migration, this ramping up of the political rhetoric, pitching the poor white person against the poor black person or the poor Asian person, and this is precisely what some of the most dark forces on our political right want. The climate of chaos serves right into their lap, and it's deeply worrying.
William Atkinson, is it the Tory party's fault then that the mood music has created the kind of laid the kindling for the flames going up in so many towns and cities across the country?
I think, quite frankly, if anybody's playing into trying to deny the reality of the situation or create a particular mood music which is out of touch where the general public is, it's to suggest that essentially people who are concerned about the historical and unprecedented levels of mass migration we've had since 1997 have essentially been lied to by the Tories and promised levelling up, something that only existed, as we say, in the last 5 years, and that they're therefore ludicrous and misguided to actually complain about, what has happened to this country since 1997, which I think is what tacitly you're suggesting. The idea that you're trying to wish this away as a failure of levelling up is, quite frankly, nonsense. As I say, these people are bigots. They should be clamped down upon by the police as harshly as possible. But if you believe that you can live in some sort of bubble where you can deny
that.
what has happened in the country since 1997 in terms of the level of migration, in terms of how unprecedented they are, and the anger that there is across the country at them, then quite frankly, we are only going to see more instances of disorder like this, and we're only going to see more violence.
One of the reasons why we've seen the ratcheting up of the temperature about migration is because it's been led by politicians. You might not remember, Brexit happened in 2016. They rode the common tiger of immigration, and we have continued to do it. We've suggested that there's some kind of national threat because of these boats. Before boats, there were lorries, but I don't remember people jumping up and down. It was because Rishi Sunak put it on the billboard.
But why was immigration?
It was one of the 5 national priorities.
In 2016, why was immigration the largest political issue? It was because immigration was running at historic and unprecedented levels. If you're trying to deny that that was the case, and that people should be concerned as this as a political issue, then you're trying to deny that the British people are able to see what's going on in front of their eyes. And I think, quite frankly, if you're suggesting this is only rhetoric and you're denying the actual reality of the situation, then you're not only saying the voters are fools, but you're, as I say, creating the climate in which these sort of hideous instances can happen again and again and again. Because these people, rightly or wrongly, don't believe that politicians are listening to them. And if we continue to have a debate which denies their concerns, however right or wrong they are, then these sort of things are going to happen again.
A climate of fear. I heard a right-wing commentator on ITV the other morning suggesting that because of the levels of migration, we didn't have enough school places. Right now, the birth rate has crashed to well beneath replacement levels because of a cost of living crisis. Because actually, that's where the real crisis lies. Forgotten communities who feel overlooked and they pick on the other. Othering, and you will know the historical precedent for othering. And then, our government says, let's dump the most vulnerable, the baddest of the lot, into Rwanda, deemed on every national and international level to be unsafe, and yet we consider these people so subhuman, we're going to send them there. And then we're surprised when some of the least able in society start throwing bricks at them.
Tessa.
Hey, I wonder who's to blame.
We'll leave it there. Tessa, William, thank you. And thank you to my panel. After the break, I was speaking to the man at the centre of an online spat triggered by the tech billionaire Elon Musk's criticism of the approach to the riots by the Prime Minister. Plus, some more coming from Charlie Peters in Aldershot. Back soon.
Evening. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Tomorrow's going to feel pretty warm and humid, and after a dry start for many, it's going to turn dull, with quite a few of us seeing outbreaks of rain and drizzle. Not from this area of low pressure, but actually from this rather innocuous-looking set of weather fronts. The low to the north, though, is still providing some hefty showers across northern Scotland. Still pretty gusty here as well. A blustery night across the far north. Elsewhere, the winds are easing. There'll be some clearer spells. A few showers across northern England, but they're tending to fade, and then we'll see the cloud, rain and drizzle spilling into South Wales and southwest England later in the night. Quite a warm night here. Elsewhere, with some clearer skies, temperatures, certainly rural spots, could dip down to single figures. So for many, it is a bright start to Thursday. There'll be some sunshine around. Still quite gusty across the far north of Scotland with a few showers, but for much of Scotland, looking drier tomorrow with some decent spells of sunshine. Will cloud over across the southwest as the cloud and rain spills into northwest England and parts of the south of Northern Ireland. A very different day for Wales and southwest England tomorrow. A lot of cloud, rain and drizzle on and off for much of the day, particularly over hills and around the coast. Whereas the Midlands and eastern England, after a dry, fine start, will just steadily cloud over. Rain trickling into parts of the Midlands, spreading across more northern parts of England. Some heavier bursts of rain possible later in the day. Not much rain for East Anglia in the southeast, just turning cloudy here, and the far northeast of Scotland also mostly dry. Temperatures 19, 20, maybe a little higher in the southeast. It is going to feel really quite warm and humid, however. The rain and drizzle will be still across the south early on Friday, but it should scoot away. Showers in the northwest, but for many, Friday's set fair, a much brighter day for Wales and southwest England for sure, with some good spells of sunshine and a fresher feel. Showery rain on Saturday, and it is likely to hot up again as we go through the weekend.
Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to State of the Nation with me, Christopher Hope. Now, we've been discussing the riots and protests across the country, and you've been getting in touch with your views. One of the most expected and unexpected developments from these riots is the way that Elon Musk has used Twitter to criticise our Prime Minister's response to the riots. After Sir Keir Starmer said on X, "We will not tolerate attacks on mosques or on Muslim communities," Mr Musk countered, "Shouldn't you, that's you, the Prime Minister, be concerned about attacks on all emphasised communities?" Mr Musk also said that civil war in the UK was inevitable, compared Britain to the Soviet Union over its policing of comments on Facebook, and tweeted the hashtag #2-tier Keir. The government condemned his language and called on Mr Musk to act responsibly, not least because he owns X. But the man who Mr Musk was retweeting was one Andy No. As you can see on the screen there, the journalist who was just returned from Birmingham following the disorder. And Andy No, the senior editor at the Post Millennial and author of Unmasked Inside Antifa's Radical Plan to Destroy Democracy, joins me now. Andy, what's it like to be targeted by arguably one of the most famous men in the world?
Well, I'm thankful that Elon chose to retweet a video of the violence that took place in Birmingham, because if you read the legacy media and you listen to what the politicians in this country have been saying, you would get the impression that the violence is only coming from the far right, when in fact there have been violent counter-reactions in Bolton, in Middlesbrough, in Stoke-on-Trent, in Birmingham by these so-called Muslim patrol groups who have carried out vigilante violence.
So it goes both ways, essentially, and your film has been to counteract the narrative from elsewhere.
I've been highlighting on social media a lot of live stream videos I've been posted by people, often part of these patrol groups in these various...
And you check the videos when you repost them?
I do, absolutely, because there is absolutely a lot of misinformation that's been floating around on social media, and it's actually caused a lot of violence. And so for me, the stuff that I post, I verify the date, the location, the parties involved. It's very easy to do that with live streams, and these are taking place primarily on TikTok.
And were you surprised when Elon Musk used your online journalism to highlight a wider point?
I don't know if I was surprised. I would say more so thankful, because he's forced the discussion to be refocused on an aspect that we've been gaslit on completely. I mean, some of these videos have gone viral on social media. You'll see, for example, a Sky News presenter talking about the violence of the far right, whilst groups behind her from these so-called Muslim patrol groups are brandishing weapons in their so-called protests.
I think the government has moved in recent days to condemn all violence across all groups rather than saying it's the far right. So maybe they're waking up to what you've been talking about.
Perhaps.
You don't see it yet.
Perhaps, but as you and I are speaking right now, there are groups that have mobilised, primarily on the left. I think a lot of in various parts of London and other cities and towns, over online rumours that there were going to be these right-wing attacks on immigration officers, which have failed to materialise. Some of this footage I've seen in Brighton right now, people are confronting people on the streets. So this is a tinderbox, and we had one night of peace yesterday, but I think that it's not just enough to talk about the conduct that's been happening. There is a subtext of what the grievances are from multiple
How
different
should
groups
viewers and listeners approach this when they see videos, they're not sure where it's come from? How do you go around and ensure that what you're looking at is real and verified? That's the concern. Obviously, we do our best at GB News, don't we?
Well, I would advise people first to look at the record of whoever's sharing that content. If it's an anonymous account and they're posting things that have, for example, no source, no date, no time, and using inflammatory rhetoric, maybe you should think twice about resharing that. and instead look at the record of people who is posting content that is accurate.
Yeah. I've got to ask you about Elon Musk. Have you ever talked to him before? You met him?
I have not met him. I've talked with him on Twitter. He's very transparent with his communications with other people, including myself, when it happens.
And you've contacted on Twitter, but not over the phone or give him a ring? Or...
I've never talked with him on the phone.
Is it good or bad he gets involved? Of course, he's someone who's based in California. He's not a Brit. He's commenting on British politics and the state of the nation at the moment. Is that a good or a bad thing?
It's a good thing for people to weigh in on things that are happening here, particularly as, people with influence have to be very careful. And I think that there's a lot of people looking for someone to blame for all the anger that's out there. And I think Elon's become an easy target rather than addressing some of these underlying issues that is reality.
There are calls now, aren't there, from people on the left in this country to ban Twitter, to ban social media. Would that help deal with disinformation and perhaps Elon Musk stirring it up, or would that not help at all?
Those calls are quite concerning to me as a free speech advocate and as a journalist. I wonder where they were when left-wing activists online spread misinformation. In 2020, I'm American, the riots that fueled multiple communities being burnt down in America was fueled by a lot of misinformation and lies online. And at that time, the establishment, the politicians, including your Prime Minister now, expressed solidarity for that type of political violence. So I think one aspect of the anger that hasn't been mentioned is that just a lack of... people notice this lack of fairness. We've been talking a lot about two-tier policing, but just even in the way people speak. There's two-tier reporting, I would argue, and two-tier speaking.
In what way? That's overlooking violence by different groups. We are reporting all on GB News as much as we can, for example.
Yes, overlooking violence from particular demographic groups, using euphemisms. I've had to push back against all these journalists who have been describing these so-called Muslim patrols as Asian men. I think it's quite an offensive euphemism to use that type of language to describe what is religiously motivated political violence.
Listen, Andy, thank you for joining us tonight on GB News. Great to have you on.
My pleasure.
And we look forward to seeing what else Elon Musk says about your tweeting. Thank you. Now, after the break, we'll be getting more reaction on the unlikely online battle and much, much more. Stay.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Prince Harry also revealed that he wouldn't bring his wife Meghan Markle back to the UK over safety concerns.
Let's talk to royal correspondent Michael Cole.
Good morning, Stephen. Good morning, Ellie. They live in California. I'm not sure what the murder rate is there, but that's a more dangerous place than Britain's at any time of the day. And of course, he compromised his own safety when he said in his book, Spare, his autobiography, which was Ghost Britain, that he'd personally killed 25 Taliban when he was serving with the British Army in Afghanistan. Well, that painted a target for life on the back of himself and his family, which was a very unwise thing for him to do. The other thing which struck me, it was that he invoked the name of the late Queen, saying that he'd had several conversations with his grandmother, and she'd been very, very supportive in his battle. He sees himself, and it's the word he's used, as a dragon slayer against the popular press, the tabloid press, and he's continuing with that. Of course, his brother, Prince William, has settled, but also in the programme was Hugh Grant. Now, Hugh Grant also has settled, as indeed did I, when I received an apology from News Group. I believe in a free and unfettered press. Newspapers are having a bad time at the moment, losing circulation, losing advertising. Young people don't read newspapers. And so I felt that the right thing to do was to settle. I didn't want to take punitive action against newspapers.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to State of the Nation. We've been discussing Elon Musk's online spat with Sir Keir Starmer. And you've been getting in touch with your views. If I can get my phone open, I will find them. Here we are. Jeff says Elon Musk has allowed Twitter to have truly free speech and he should be thanked for it. I'm not sure everyone agrees on this panel with that. And Amy says Elon should be careful what he shares as per what Andy says. There's a lot of misinformation out online, as we've seen over the past few days. Well, we'll discuss those remarks and the wider issue of the riots shortly with our panel. But first, to Charlie Peters, our national reporter. He's still in Aldershot, where protest has begun. Charlie, what's happening where you are?
Hi, Chopper. Well, there are two sides across the road here in Aldershot. To my left, you have Stand Up to Racism with their demonstration against a mooted anti-immigration rally that was anticipated in the town centre today. They never turned up, but Stand Up to Racism did. In reaction to their arrival, we have seen a demonstration to my right appear quite organically in opposition to those over the road. Earlier today, down in Farnborough, about 10-minute drive away, there was a peaceful anti-immigration demonstration. The people there told me they'd gone to that location because they didn't want to get involved in any trouble with those across the road. I can say I've seen a few of the people who were there now here. Now, the people on that demonstration by the road, they said that they were opposing the small boats crisis. They were angry about the riots across the country over the last week, but they were also angry about the term far right being used by many, not just the government, but by commentators as well, to describe those involved in the demonstrations. They said it was a peaceful move. It was, of course, very peaceful when I was there. No violence occurred when we were at that roundabout. People were holding up signs saying, "Beep if you are opposed to small boats," and lots of people were honking their horns as they moved past. But here now in the town centre, as the sun sets, there's quite a lot of anger here from both sides. Just to show you some of the signs we're seeing across the street. Nazi scum off our streets, deport the far right. Your mum raised a Nazi. That's a very pointed line to point towards someone, of course. No signs on the counter demonstration on my side of the road where I am behind the police line. But they certainly have taken an extremely negative reaction to the term Nazi, the term scum. They especially did not enjoy being told that our enemies travel by private jet, not small boats. Some of the demonstrators I spoke to earlier said no one is their enemy. They aren't against anyone due to race, colour or creed. They're just extremely frustrated by the small boats crisis, by mass immigration and by the pressures it's putting on the local economy. They said that housing was a major issue for people in Aldershot, and those pressures have been pushed up by the small boats crisis. There was protests here over the weekend. Some people arrested, I think 7 arrests by Hampshire police. At a demonstration outside a hotel nearby hosting asylum seekers. But tonight there's a standoff between Stand Up to Racism and an organic right-wing anti-immigration counter-protest.
Thank you, Charlie. And Charlie Peters there reporting from Aldershot right now. And I'm joined by my panel in the studio here in Westminster, historian and broadcaster Tessa Dunlop and assistant editor of Conservative Home, William Atkinson. Tessa, you heard Charlie Peters there. There's fury and anger about the small boats crisis. He is saying there, which is fueling the problem.
He's just said that the small boats crisis has deliberately contributed to the housing crisis in Aldershot. That's what your reporter on GB News has just said. Now, given the statistics on the numbers coming over in small boats relative to the 1.5 million migration statistic overall, we had in 2023 29,000 coming over in small boats. This year, 16,000. I find it really hard to believe that those numbers are directly contributing to the housing crisis in Aldershot. And that is how careless lines on media platforms like this one help trigger and fuel these protests, which sometimes become violent and life-threatening.
William, is that right? No, it's right to say that immigration is putting pressure on services, on housing in Aldershot and elsewhere, isn't it?
Yes, no, I'm very glad that Tessa believes levels of legal migration are too high and contributing to the housing crisis. The CPS especially has recently done very good work on this, which
the Centre for Policy
Studies, suggesting that you have a look at that. And yes, I think, you know, it's very important that we don't conflate, especially when passions are as high as they are, various different issues, and especially when we've got a very obvious sense of polarisation between various different groups. And I think the biggest problem that we face collectively, whichever side of the political spectrum you're on at the moment, is that tempers have become very high, and the particular language that we use, the particular arguments that we make
by the Tory government,
whether and actually between politicians of all political stripes, you know, not just saying that in a sort of kumbaya style of way, but the thing is that we are currently looking at a country which is going through the greatest collapse and public collapse in authority of a government since the winter of discontent, and we're doing that a month into a new government rather than 4 years into a government, as was the case with Callaghan et al. And what we're seeing are the unravelling of various different forms of community policing that have gone on at both parties for about 40 years. And we're seeing various different issues being conflated, issues of policing, of immigration, and indeed how we regulate social media, all going on at once. And I think the problem is that tempers are getting very high. And I think especially if we do have an Israeli invasion of Lebanon in the next couple of weeks, tempers are only going to get even higher.
Yeah, we're not there yet.
Yeah.
Thank goodness,
I'm
William.
not sure that we're seeing
But about the winter discontent, you're a historian. Is that about right?
No, I would take you back to 2011. And it was 8 times the number of arrests. And I actually don't think that we've seen an unravelling of community policing. I think the police have held together remarkably well, to be honest, given they seem to be assailed from all sides. And, you know, it's in law. If you are violent and disorderly, you may receive up to a 5-year prison sentence.
Are you content with the language of the Labour government about this? Blaming the far right, talking about thugs?
I felt... Yeah, fair question. This was Keir Starmer coming out, I think, at the beginning of the week, saying it was that there was a far-right thugs, and this was in relation to bricks, violence. I don't think he was talking about people with placards saying stop the small boats. I think he was talking about the fringe element that had stepped over the line and broken the law. And yeah, it did look like they were triggered by far-right tendencies and they were behaving like thugs. But it's a bit like Suella Braverman labelling most people, or seemingly too many people, on pro-Palestine or supportive Palestine marches as hate marches.
Doesn't make it right, though, does Tessa Dunlop. William Atkinson, do you think any of this is on the government's communication? Is it all about blaming it on public service issues locally?
I think there are myriads of sense of reasons why people go out looting. I mean, partly I think it's down to the government and the way that it's treating it, and I think especially if the government thinks it's all down to social media, then they're going to have a very rude awakening over the next 5 years. But I think, as I said, you know, there's the collapse of not only the previous government's failure to create the sort of capacity within the judicial system that we require, but various tensions that have been long-running and are very difficult to manage are currently unravelling at pace. And I think, as I say, this is the greatest challenge to a government's authority since the winter of discontent. The bricks and riots in 1981 and then the riots in 2011 were dealt with relatively quickly. This is going to be running for the next 5 years and beyond. This is going to get much worse.
Because channels like this perhaps want it to.
Joining us on
the creation of the climate of chaos.
Thanks to my panel. They're still going. Up next is Patrick.
Gives you a good opportunity to get on television.
Patrick, what's coming up?
Yes, thank you very much, Christopher. Right, OK, so in the last half hour or so, I would say that there has been a slight escalation in tensions in places like Birmingham, London, Aldershot and several other locations. We're going to be keeping you right up to date with that. A police officer has been thanking elders of the Muslim community for letting him talk to that community. That's caused a little bit of outrage. The latest opinion polls show that immigration is now the main issue for people facing the country at the moment, and Shamima Begum could use the ECHR to come back to Britain.
Splendid, Patrick. Well, that's coming up after the weather. I'll be back tomorrow night, 8 p.m, still on State of the Nation, while Jacob enjoys his well-earned holiday. See you then. Do tune in.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Evening. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Tomorrow's going to feel pretty warm and humid, and after a dry start for many, it's going to turn dull, with quite a few of us seeing outbreaks of rain and drizzle. Not from this area of low pressure, but actually from this rather innocuous-looking set of weather fronts. The low to the north, though, is still providing some hefty showers across northern Scotland. Still pretty gusty here as well. A blustery night across the far north. Elsewhere, the winds are easing. There'll be some clearer spells. A few showers across northern England, but they're tending to fade. And then we'll see the cloud, rain and drizzle spilling into South Wales and southwest England later in the night. Quite a warm night here. Elsewhere, with some clearer skies. Temperatures, certainly rural spots, could dip down to single figures. So for many, it is a bright start to Thursday. There'll be some sunshine around. Still quite gusty across the far north of Scotland with a few showers, but for much of Scotland, looking drier tomorrow with some decent spells of sunshine. Will cloud over across the southwest as the cloud and rain spills into northwest England and parts of the south of Northern Ireland. A very different day for Wales and southwest England tomorrow. A lot of cloud, rain and drizzle on and off for much of the day, particularly over hills and around the coast. Whereas the Midlands and eastern England, after a dry, fine start, will just steadily cloud over. Rain trickling into parts of the Midlands, spreading across more northern parts of England. Some heavier bursts of rain possible later in the day. Not much rain for East Anglia in the southeast, just turning cloudy here, and the far northeast of Scotland also mostly dry. Temperatures 19, 20, maybe a little higher in the southeast. It is going to feel really quite warm and humid, however. The rain and drizzle will be still across the south early on Friday, but it should scoot away. Showers in the northwest, but for many, Friday's set fair, a much brighter day for Wales and southwest England for sure, with some good spells of sunshine and a fresher feel. Showery rain on Saturday, and it is likely to hot up again as we go through the weekend.
Looks like